we're going to start with Jeff. We're going to start asking Jeff a question about where we can find exactly bears, not bears. We're going to talk about the history of black bears. Jeff, tell us a little bit about the history of black bears in Missouri.
Okay, well, black bears were abundant prior to European settlement, and they were actually pretty important for the early settlers. They used them as a source of income and for meat. The fat from bears was used for rendering, and so they could make candles and they could put it on their leather to waterproof it. So it had a lot of uses. Unfortunately, bears were in a situation in which we were having unregulated hunting and unregulated timber harvest, and that resulted in a lot of changes in the landscape that bears just couldn't tolerate, and they basically were extirpated from the state. We would see occasional or hear of occasional sightings, one in the Boot Heel, a couple of sightings in the Ozarks and Dent County, but we weren't sure what was going on. Were there actually bears out there? Were there being bears released? But we do know that in the 1960s, Arkansas began a reintroduction program. And what they would do is they would go up into Canada and into Minnesota, and they would get bears, bring them back to Arkansas, let them go. And some of these bears probably homed or went north, trying to go back to Minnesota or Manitoba. They landed in Missouri, and this kind of was the spark of our population that we have today.
All right. Now, Bear, could you tell us, Jeff, a little bit about the distribution in Missouri? You know, where can we find bears throughout Missouri, and what's the population right now?
Yeah, we keep sightings from the public. The public are our eyes, obviously. Folks are out in the woods. They have game cameras. We can't be everywhere. So we rely on the public to report bear sightings, and that helps us with our range maps, and it helps us decide or determine, where the populations may be expanding. These sightings are sometimes a little misleading because some young male bears will go into some pretty unusual spots, and we'll get a lot of sightings, but they won't stay. And we see that in North Missouri. If we want to look at where we really have reproducing populations of bears, they're basically centered in south central Missouri. And we've determined what I would call their breeding home range based on some telemetry that we've done with female bears. And these female bears have really tight home ranges that they go to every year. So this home range that we're showing right now would be what I would call the home range of bears in Missouri that are actually reproducing and have established ranges.
What is the estimated population right now in Missouri? I know we're talking about they're kind of right down in south central Missouri, but how many do we have?
We're estimating we have around 350 bears in the state. What we're seeing right now on the screen is home range information from some of our females, and we used this information to help us determine how many bears we had using some different DNA techniques. What's really interesting about these ranges is you can see one range on top of another. Each color represents a new bear. And so what we have are a lot of females that are related. And this is a result of one female having offspring. Those offspring stay if they're females. If they're males, they get to boot after about a year, and then they'll take off to new areas. So in these home ranges where we have females, they're going to all be related. And typically these start with a matriarchal female, and then all her offspring stay and reproduce.
All right, Jeff, that's very interesting. As we're talking about the females, we're going to jump into ask a little bit more about black bear habitat and the history, life history here. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, bears are omnivores. They're kind of like people. They're going to eat what they like, and they're going to eat what's available. I often compare them with raccoons as well. So they'll eat anything from fruit to mass, nuts, berries, insects, meat if they can find it. In some areas, they eat a lot of fish. They sort of like to eat what's most available, and they kind of have an ability to find out what's most nutritious for them. And so at certain times of the year, for example, when beetles are in a certain stage, they're going to go after these beetles because they're very nutritious. Generally, they eat a lot of mast, and that's probably the most important food for them in Missouri is acorns.
What I find interesting about bears, if you can touch on this, is the reproduction rates. Bears are not like deer. Tell us how they're not like deer in the reproduction rates, and kind of touch on that.
Yeah, there's a couple things that are different. The first thing is that bears don't reproduce until they're anywhere from age 3 to age 7. So, you could have a 7-year-old bear that still hasn't had a cub. And we're trying to look at that in Missouri to see, well, do they most often breed at age 4, 5, 6, or 7? We're learning that most of the time they're breeding around age 4 in Missouri. Bears have something called delayed implantation, meaning that they breed in June, but they don't really have a fetus until January when they have what's called implantation in their uterus. Then they have that cub while they're in hibernation. The mother's basically asleep. The cub is born and starts to nurse, and from that point the cub grows real rapidly.
So there's a lot of information you're talking about the reproduction rates. As we move on to talk about the Black Bear Research Project, I'm assuming this is how you know all this information about black bears here in Missouri, is because of the research project. Tell us a little bit about the research project and how are you getting this information on Missouri's black bears?
Sure. You know, in 2010, we started to do some bear research and came up with a population estimate of around 280 bears at that time. The question then became, well, how fast is this population growing, or is it even growing? So we made a strong effort to capture female bears. And by capturing female bears, we can learn how old are they when they first breed, how many cubs do they have, how many of those cubs survive from one year to the next. And so this enables us to learn quite a bit about what's going on the landscape. So far, we're looking at several different dens each year, and we're able to follow those cubs from the time they were born. When we check them in March, and we'll check them again the next year because they will stay with their mother for 2 denning periods. Then we can learn, well, did those cubs survive from age 0 to age 1, and that'll give us an idea of how fast our population might be growing.
Can you tell us a little bit about the process of collaring a bear, and how do you know where to find those bears when you're saying you're checking cubs and checking the females? How do you do that? Is there like a transmitter or something on the bear that'll let you know that?
Yeah, it's probably the most exciting thing we get to do is go to a bear den. Most of the time, bears are captured in the summertime, and we put a radio collar on them that gives us our ability to track them down. And then when we go walking in the wintertime, we may have to walk a mile back in the woods, and that beep is getting louder, which indicates we're getting closer to the animal. And then we have to start looking around. Okay, is this bear dead in a cave? Is she underneath a tree? Is she up in a hollow tree? And as we get closer and closer, the anticipation kind of builds. And then pretty soon you see the bear, you see the hole, or you can hear a cub squalling. And then you're starting to get excited, and you get to actually go in the den, tranquilize the mother. And of course, we handle the cubs to make sure they just don't get cold or run off on us.
Now, is there something, like, I know there's a collar, but is there some type of chip or something that are in the bears that let you know that, or you can follow?
It's the collars that allow us to follow. When we handle the bears, we put something called a pit tag or a microchip. Sometimes the veterinarians will call it, and we'll put it in the bear as another source of marking. For example, we've had bears that we've lost contact with for 5 years, and we might find this bear was hit by a car. We might catch it again. Has no ear tag, has no radio collar, but we're able to figure it out because we can check for that chip. And oh yeah, that's that bear from Howell County that we caught back in 2016 or something, you know.
Okay. Well, good. We're going to move on and ask a question to Mary about, this is important. What is the importance of being bear aware, and why should we be, Mary?
Yeah, so you can think of being bear aware as having a certain kind of mindset. It's thinking about how what you're doing is going to affect bears, whether that's when you're out hiking or camping, or if it's on your own property. You could also think of it as being bear friendly. So a big thing that you want to think of when you're thinking about being bear aware is, what do I do if I actually see a bear out in the wild somewhere? And the first thing that you should remember if you see a bear is that you should just leave it alone. Respect its space and don't try to get any closer to it. This is definitely not a good time to try to get a selfie. Don't try to get up close to it, try to get a video picture or anything like that. Sometimes it's really exciting to see an animal out in the wild, and we kind of get overcome with excitement and we forget that it's actually a wild animal. It's not tame, it's not something that we can approach, and that would be safe. So just try to remember to leave it alone and appreciate it from a distance.
Mary, one thing, if I might interject, is that I like to tell landowners that when a bear comes in your backyard, make it a negative experience for that animal.
Exactly.
Whether you scare it away, you throw rocks at it, you bang noises, shoot a gun up in the air, if we make that bear afraid of us, it's going to have a lot better chance of living a long time.
Exactly. You don't want it to be a positive experience where it comes around people and it thinks, hey, that was great. I got something good to eat. Nothing bad happened. I'm going to try that again. We want our bears to stay wild and stay out in the woods where they're safe and where we can be safe too.
Good. Could you tell us, Mary, a little bit about what bear country is? When you say that term, what does that mean?
Yeah, so you can kind of think of bear country in Missouri as what Jeff was saying, where bears have their main home range in the state. That's south central Missouri.
Okay.
It's really anywhere where bears are common. And sometimes you have a young male bear that will disperse somewhere surprising in the state, maybe around St. Louis, but that's pretty rare. So most of the time down in south central Missouri, you can expect you're in bear country.
Okay. When traveling through bear country, tell us a little bit about that, what we should do when you're down there, if you're camping, you're in bear country, staying alert or...
Yeah, so the best thing to do, the biggest thing to do when you're in bear country is look around, pay attention, stay alert. Look around to where you're at. If you're in a place that has a bunch of really ripe berry bushes, a bear might like to be there also. If you're in a place that's got a lot of dense vegetation where you can't see very well, a bear is not going to be able to see you very well either. So in places like that, you want to keep your eye out for tracks in the mud, scat, places where a bear has clawed on a tree. Things like that will tell you a bear might be in the area. When you're in places like that too, the best thing to do is to make sure you make a lot of noise. Bears are actually really shy animals. They're really timid. They don't want to have a run-in with people. So if you make a lot of noise and let them know that you're coming, that will give them a chance to get out of the way before you even know that they're there. A good way to do that is to just talk to everybody that you're with. You can sing songs, you can clap your hands, you can even talk out loud to yourself if you have to. If you're alone, it's always best to go outside with a friend, let somebody know where you're going, do your adventuring with other people. And it's also good to have a good group of people if you're in bear country. It's more intimidating and you're safer that way with extra people. Another important thing to remember to do in bear country is keep your dogs on a leash. Dogs and bears do not get along, so you don't want your dog running back to you for backup when it's got an angry bear chasing it.
Can you tell us a little bit about, I know you're talking on here mentioning dogs, but also when you're walking, something that you could carry, for protection?
Yeah, so a lot of people might think that if they're out in the woods, it might be best to have a gun, and that can be helpful for other reasons, but if you're going to be in bear country, it's a really good idea to consider carrying bear spray. That's a self-defense spray, really similar to what you would use against a person. It's just a really strong pepper spray. It comes in a big canister and it sprays maybe 30 feet. And it works like it does on a person. It gets into the bear's eyes and its lungs and it stops it in its tracks and gives you a chance to get away. The thing to remember about bear spray is that you want to keep it somewhere that's really accessible. Keep it in a holster on your belt or on your pack so that you can get to it right away. If it's buried in your pack and you can't reach it, if you see a bear, it's not going to help you very much. You can buy bear spray at camping supply stores. It's $40 to $50. It might be kind of expensive, but if you're going to be in bear country a lot, you can look at it as an investment, like a fire extinguisher, something that you hope you never have to use, but it can really be helpful, can save your life if you do need it.
Good. Mary, tell us, what should someone do if they do encounter a bear?
So first of all, remember that it's very, very unlikely that you're actually going to see a bear in Missouri. Like Jeff said, we only have about 350 bears in the whole state. So it's pretty unlikely you're going to come across one. But if you do, also remember, bears are really shy. They are really not aggressive, and they really don't want to attack you. So it's going to be pretty unlikely that you're going to get attacked. But if you do happen to come up close to a bear for some reason, first thing you want to do is stay calm. You can speak in a calm, loud voice to let the bear know what you are. You want to raise up your arms, hold your coat out. You want to look bigger. Get all the members of your party grouped together so that you look more intimidating. You want to pick up any small children you have with you so they don't get scared and run away, and keep control of your dog. Put it on a leash or grab a hold of its collar. Then you want to just back away slowly. Don't turn around, don't run away. You want to keep your eye on the bear, and a bear is a lot like a dog. You don't want to run away from a dog that is intimidating you, because that's going to make it want to chase you even more. So back away slowly, keep your eye on the bear, and just try to put space between you and the bear.
One thing, too, that our listeners should probably know, that it's not normal behavior for a bear to come up to a person. If a bear comes up to you, that's an indication that that animal's been fed, and we need to know about that. So if you do have a bear that comes up to you, do everything that Mary said, but also let us know, let your agent know, or let another department representative know, because that's an indication that that bear's been fed, and that bear isn't respecting humans like other bears do. So they see bears in a different light. We would probably need to take some action if we have bears that come up to individuals.
That brings us to the next question, Jeff and Mary, why is it important we don't feed a bear?
Well, the worst thing that you can do for a bear is provide food for it. Bears are a lot like dogs. If you feed a dog from your dinner table, it's going to learn that if it sits right next to you and maybe cries or jumps up on you, that you're going to give it more food. A bear is just the same. You don't want it to learn that if it comes around homes or campsites, neighborhoods, places like that, that it's going to find an easy meal. So don't provide food for bears either on purpose. Sometimes people want to see bears up close, or they think it's cool to have them on their property. And sometimes they just don't know that they shouldn't have their garbage out or their bird feeders out. And so the bear is getting food on accident on their property.
So also, with feeding bear, it also can cause other problems for the bear in general. You want to chime in on that, Jeff?
Yeah, in our bear research, we've caught almost 100 different bears over the past several years. And in some areas where folks have been feeding bears for a long time, we actually catch them and we notice that their teeth are rotten. Bears have evolved to eat acorns and insects and berries, but they haven't evolved to eat sweets and other human foods. These bears that we're finding that have the rotten teeth are not going to live to be 20 years old like we would expect a wild bear to live. When their teeth are infected, they lose their ability to feed. So people are trying to help bears by feeding them, but they're actually hurting bears when they do that.
All right, that's interesting. Talking about that, you're talking about bear attractants. I mean, what are some of the bear attractants? What should people know about that, Mary?
Yeah, so basically anything a bear can smell, it's going to be attracted to. And bears think lots of things that are smelly are food that we wouldn't consider food. Things like garbage, or if you're camping, things like toiletries or toothpaste, even shampoo. That stuff all smells really strongly to a bear, and it makes them curious and they want to investigate it, even if it isn't actually food. So on your property, one of the biggest attractants for bears is garbage. So to manage that, you want to wait to put it out for pickup until the morning that it's going to be picked up instead of the night before. You can also use bear-resistant garbage cans. Those are made out of really sturdy plastic or metal. They have latches on them that bears can't open. You also want to disinfect those garbage cans too, so that you can keep the smell down. There's lots of other things too that people have on their properties commonly, stuff like pet food, livestock feed, horse grain, bird seed, things like that. You want to keep that stuff stored in a secure building like your garage or inside your house. And make sure that you don't feed pets, outside pets, a portion that they're not going to be able to eat right away. Take their dishes in at night. Clean up any spilled food, stuff like that.
Okay, Mary, can you tell us where we can get some more information on how to be bear aware so people can know about this?
Yeah, so our website is a great place to get more information. You can go to mdc.mo.gov/bearaware. That will give you some guidelines to staying safe in bear country and ways that you can protect your property, make it more bear friendly. You can also go to the search bar and search for black bear. You can also report bear sightings on our website, so we can know where our bears are at in the state, know what they're up to.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you again, both Jeff and Mary, for the great information on black bears today. I'm encouraging, and I want to thank you to the 100 participants that are following us right now. Let's hear from you. Share your questions through the chat box on the right side of the webcast screen, and we will try to cover as much as we can in this hour. And again, I encourage you to submit them through all participants in the drop-down arrow and submit through the chat box. So start submitting your questions now, and Jeff and Mary will be glad to answer them. First and foremost, I'm curious to know Are black bears aggressive, and should we be scared, Jeff and Mary?
I don't consider black bears aggressive. It's, when we're climbing into a bear den and there's a female bear and she has her cubs and she actually allows us to come in there and to tranquilize her. That says a lot about the temperament of a bear. Again, the most important thing is that we just cannot feed bears, and once a bear becomes fed, then it changes their personality.
All right. This is for both of you. Will Missouri ever have a bear hunting season? And if so, how many will be allowed to be harvested, and will non-residents be able to hunt?
Well, I know that we do plan on having a season. We have a benchmark of 500 bears before we start considering a hunting season. I think at that time we'll probably have some sort of season which would be for residents only early on in the season. It will be a limited quota. We'll try to harvest a smaller number of bears, and we'll try to focus our harvest on male bears so that we can continue to grow the population in areas where it needs to, but it allows folks to take care of nuisance bears or folks that are interested in eating bears to hunt a bear.
All right. And what does the population have to get before we even think about something like that happening here in Missouri?
500 animals is kind of our benchmark.
All right. And here's another question for Mary. I mean, can someone shoot a bear if they see it on their property? This is from Stanley.
So that's a good question. If a bear is actually threatening somebody, it's attacking a person, it's attacking livestock, that's a situation where it would be appropriate to actually shoot a bear. In that circumstance, you would want to report that right away within 24 hours to your conservation agent, and you have to surrender the carcass and the pelt at that time too. But try to remember that bears really, like we said before, they're really not aggressive. If you just see one on your property or see one nearby, there's really no need at all to shoot it, especially not if it's not doing anything to threaten anybody else.
Thanks, Mary. That was awesome. This one's from Jim. Can people participate in a bear den capture study, Jeff?
We have we've taken quite a bit of video, which would certainly allow folks to see what we do, and much of that is on our website. Occasionally, we will take interns out, or folks that have made some arrangements. We try to do that, but typically we don't bring the public out on these situations because we want to have a real controlled setting.
We were talking about bear dens. Can you tell us a little bit more about bear dens? Because a lot of us think of bear dens, that a big cave you would see, that a bear would go crawl into and hibernate up for the winter. But where do black bears in Missouri usually hibernate?
Yeah, sometimes that's quite variable. We see bears that go in your classic caves, but typically we see bears that go in really tight quarters, tight rock crevices. They like to go into trees. Sometimes they will den up in a tree where they enter a hollow area and then they come way down towards the bottom of the tree and they den there. Sometimes they will den in a tree that has fallen over in the base where the root wad is. They'll excavate and get underneath there. And sometimes they'll just lay against the tree, and that's where they sleep. It's kind of surprising. I'm not sure if all of a sudden they get tired and they say, I'm going to sleep by this tree. And others may put more into it and find a den at sometime in July and they go back to it when they den.
That's interesting. And another guy named Jim's actually was curious to know, do bears often climb trees? As you're talking about, some of them actually hibernate in some of the bases, but do they climb trees? Do you find them there?
Oh yeah, bears are incredibly good at climbing trees. They do it very fast. They will climb trees to break branches so they can get the acorns before everything else. They will climb trees to get cherries. They will climb trees. And if you see a bear in a tree, most of the time, if it's not eating, it's trying to get away from people. So when a bear is in a tree, it's seeking refuge.
Okay. Mary, this one's for you. A question from Cheryl. What should someone do if they see a bear in a city?
So if you see a bear in a city, that can be because of a lot of reasons. Bears, especially young male bears, as they're dispersing, are looking for new home ranges. They're looking for resources like food or a mate. And so sometimes they don't know where they're going and they run into a developed area. If that's the case, remember again, bears are very rarely aggressive. It's not a dangerous situation. So leave the bear alone, appreciate it from a distance, make sure you don't corner it anywhere. You want to make sure that your kids and your pets are safe inside your house. And then you can let your local conservation agent know that the bear is in the area, and then just leave it alone and let it move on its own.
All right, thanks, Mary. Question from Stephen. Bears in Wayne County. Where are there bears in Wayne County? And if so, can we find that? Where can you find that information at?
We have occasional bears in Wayne County, and that would be your subadult male bears, which are kind of wandering, they're doing their walkabouts. I don't have any indication that we have female bears. We have good habitat in Wayne County, and I think we will have bears there in the future. I just don't think they've gotten there yet. The female bears haven't. About as far east as we go is into around Peck Ranch or Carter County, in those areas. That's about as far east as our female bears go right now.
If we're talking about females, Jeff, can you tell us how can you tell the difference between a male and a female from a distance in black bears?
Well, you can guess from a distance. If it's a really big bear, it's more likely to be a male bear. And males tend to have more of a wider dished face. Females have a little bit of a longer. But probably the best indicator is that females tend to travel with other bears. Either they have cubs or they have yearlings. So if you see multiple bears, oftentimes that means there's females involved.
Okay. What is the average height and weight of a male bear? I mean, you're talking they're bigger than females, so.
You know, we've caught bears that were approaching 600 pounds going into their dens, and they may have weighed a little bit more by the time they get there. You know, this time of the year, starting right now, bears are doing something called hyperphagia, which means they're trying to eat about 20,000 calories a day. That's why they're going to come up to people's bird feeders. That's why they're going to places where there's other sorts of food, because that's a lot, 20,000 calories. When they're eating this kind of food, they can gain 30% of their body weight.
Wow. Wow.
So that's a lot. They're getting ready for hibernation, and that's why they're seeking out those high-calorie foods.
You were talking about bird feeders. You know, we mentioned this earlier, but kind of touch on the subject of when you feed bears. If you live in bear country, it's important during the spring and fall to actually put up your bird feeders, so because bears will get access to them. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, you know, bird feeders are not important for birds in the summertime, and many ornithologists would tell you it's a good idea to give it a break. The birds go to their natural foods. We reduce the disease transmission, and now add to that, you don't attract a bear into a place where it shouldn't be. So we recommend that folks begin feeding birds when it gets cold after deer season, and then take their feeders down sometime around turkey season in the spring.
Okay. Is it okay to build up brush piles on your land, I guess, for bears or around bears?
Yeah, you know, it could work. You know, I'm pretty convinced that bears spend their summer traveling, and at some point they've probably looked at 5 or 6 different den sites, and they come back to one. I know for sure one of our radio-collared bears actually denned in a site where a person had cut down 4 or 5 trees, dropped them on top of one another, made just kind of a cubby, and a bear found it and then denned there. So it could work.
And what color are usually black bears in Missouri? Are they always black, Mary, Jeff?
They can range. They can be all the way from pure black to pretty much white. Here in Missouri, we tend to have a lot of the cinnamon-colored bears. And Jeff, I'm sure, has a lot more experience with seeing a bunch of bears in the wild.
What's interesting to me is Southwest Missouri tends to have more black bears with a white chest, and then as you go east, we have a higher number of cinnamon or brown-colored bears. And this is a trait that may be genetically linked, or it may just be haphazard, but that's kind of what we're seeing. Probably when the bears were released in Arkansas, a couple of those were cinnamon-colored that came up to Missouri, and there's where our genetics came from.
And this is a question from Ann. How good is black bears' eyesight, their hearing and smell?
Bears can see about as good as humans, and I think they can hear a little better than humans. Their smell is what they're known for, which is outstanding. How good an animal can smell usually has to do with how long is their nose and how many different bones do they have in their nose. Think of a bloodhound. Mm-hmm. His long nose, they're great at smelling. A bear can smell better than a bloodhound.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, they're good. They can smell stuff that is miles away.
Wow. Jeremy, you were talking about miles away, was asking how far do bears travel? Is there an estimated range?
We have had male bears will cover about 120 miles in 1 year. Some of these young male bears that are going on a walkabout will travel almost 1,000 miles. We've had bears that have wandered for almost a year and a half before they actually settled down into a home range. And when you start looking at all these distances, they're moving 1,000 miles.
There was a specific bear we just had, you were talking about earlier, that traveled, how far was it?
Yeah, that's the one I was referring to that has probably gone 1,000. He was captured in southwest Missouri, went north, wintered around Warrenton, Missouri, and then after that he went back south and he's been making loops in south central Missouri trying to find the right homestead, I guess.
Wow.
And it looks like he may have found a girlfriend because he's settling down right now.
Huh. Teresa is wanting to know, what kind of land management can people do to provide bear habitat?
I think the important thing to consider if you're doing habitat is that a bear has a huge home range. 40 to 100 square miles means you're not going to provide a whole lot of anything for a bear, but if you focus on only one thing, that's the best you could do. So try to focus on your trees that are producing acorns. Focus on areas so you can produce blackberries. Especially those early fruits are the most important. Bears coming out of their dens are hungry. If they can find berries, that's the first good food source they can come to.
Any advice for beekeepers? Carrie is wanting to know that.
Yeah, so bears love beehives, we know that. They really love to eat the honey, but they also love to eat the larvae that they find in the beehives. And beehives aren't really something that you can move easily into a building. And so the best long-term solution for beehives is to surround them with electric fencing. And we have plans on our website that you can look up, or you can contact the conservation agent or the wildlife damage biologist in your area for help. You also want to think about where you have the beehives on your property. Don't put them next to really dense vegetation where a bear can easily get in and out and hide and feel comfortable accessing them. Put them out somewhere in the open. That will help too.
You can buy an electric fencer for under $100 now. And when you put that fence up, make sure it's well grounded, and that's the best insurance you can have if you're a beekeeper.
All right. Heather wants to know the most important thing we need to know about bears. Well, what would you like people to know the most important about Missouri's black bears?
The single most important issue facing black bears today is feeding by humans. Bears are kind of new to Missourians, and we have an opportunity to start from scratch. You know, back in the early days, we encouraged people to feed bears in Yellowstone Park, and biologists over time have learned that was a mistake. So we have an opportunity now that if folks don't feed bears, we're going to have a wild population of bears, and we're going to have a minimal number of conflicts. That's the best we can hope for.
We were talking about bear spray earlier. Susan would like to know, does bear spray harm the bear if you spray a bear with bear spray?
They're going to be pretty unhappy right when you spray it, but it definitely doesn't cause any long-term harm.
So basically, if you spray them, when you say unhappy, are they going to come at you still, or is it actually, any stats that's actually going to make them go away?
It's very effective at incapacitating them. They can't see, they can't really breathe very well, and it's very distracting. So it would be very rare for a bear to be able to run through that.
Okay. Well, as you say run, it's funny you say that, because Bobby has a question. I was curious of how fast a bear can run.
I've seen evidence that said bears could run 30 to 35 miles an hour, which is faster than a human for sure, and faster than most land mammals.
Okay.
In Missouri, anyway.
We were talking about movement, and it's primarily most of the bear populations in south central Missouri. But Dennis was curious, will bears move into the northern Missouri at any time?
I think that we are going to see these occasional young male bears in North Missouri, and we'll see this. The number of these sightings or events will increase, but I don't think we're ever going to have a population of bears in North Missouri. It won't work. There's too many people, and bears will get in trouble, and I don't think it would be responsible for us as an agency to try to encourage or allow bears to establish in parts of North Missouri.
David is curious about the breeding piece. He's asking, are there concerns about inbreeding due to the small isolated ranges and populations of females? Does that have effect on the black bears here in Missouri?
We have done some genetic work, and our bears are, the evidence suggests that they're not inbred. And so I think what's happening is we're having a lot of different male bears that are helping to prevent the fact that we have these small starting population. But we still have bears coming up from Arkansas, new male bears. Some of our male bears are going south, and I think we still have a good genetic flow.
Have we seen an impact on the deer population because of the black bears?
Yeah, I was hoping we would have that question. Bears are not a major predator of fawns. There are some studies that show bears can impact fawns, but those are really in extreme cases. For example, up in the far north, where all the white-tailed deer will fawn in a certain area or certain habitats, bears learn that. But that's not the case in Missouri. In Missouri, we have a habitat where white-tailed deer can fawn in any area, and a bear has to find that fawn, and to eat it, a bear has to find a fawn within the first 10 or so days. So most of our fawn predation is probably going to be from coyotes. Bears won't be a big factor.
Thanks, Bill, for that question. That was really interesting to know about that. Joan has a question. She's saying she's seen the MDC staff holding cubs. Why is that? Is that part of the research? When you're doing den work, why are some MDC staff holding cubs?
Well, when we do a female in her den, we will tranquilize her, do her measurements, and put a new collar on her. In the meantime, we want to make sure those cubs don't get too cold, and so we'll pass the cubs out, have folks hold them. We also do measurements on the cubs, give them a pit tag or a microchip so that we can find that animal later. Then once we have that female done, we'll put her back in the den, we'll put the cubs in there with her, and then they'll stay.
Well, Jeff, you talk about a lot of den work, and I'm kind of curious, since you've worked with bears for a long time, have you had ever any close calls with bears, or do you have any emotions when you're going into that den head first, because there's pictures of that as well? I mean, what are your thoughts going into a den with a female and her cubs?
This is a good day. Anytime I get to go do a bear den, it's a good day to see a bear in the wild, but it's most exciting sometimes you see these bears 2 or 3 years in a row, and like, okay, what's she denning in this year? Did her cubs make it? We want to know if her cubs made it. How many cubs did she have? So there's a lot of anticipation. It's really exciting to see the bears in their dens, and sometimes I feel like I probably shouldn't be disturbing them, but what we're learning, well, that'll help us a whole bunch when it comes to bear management on a larger perspective.
Any scary moments, any frightening moments for you when going in a bear den?
I had a bear bluff charge me and actually spit on me one time, which was pretty exciting. I wasn't fearing for my life, but it was something that got my attention. And every time I do that den, which I call that bear Crazy Mary, I think she may remember me.
Awesome. Colton wants to know, do bears attack livestock, cattle? Is there proof of that? Are they interested in cattle? Do they bother cattle?
It's very rare. If you have animals that are calving, giving birth, you might want to keep them near a barn or inside of a barn right when that's happening. But really, they don't tend to go after animals that are that large.
I've actually had a couple of our radio-collared bears that were treed by cows. The cows ran the bear up a tree, so they were, and that probably happens more than the other way around.
That's interesting fact. More questions coming in. We're trying to answer them as fast as we can. Jim, he's curious to know, how well do bears swim? Do they cross the Missouri River? I mean, are they that well at swimming?
They do. They cross the Missouri River. We had a bear, well, I can't say for sure he didn't take the bridge, but we had a bear that went from Warrenton south, and I saw that he crossed either right by the bridge or on the bridge. But we also have radio-collared bears that have swam across Bull Shoals Lake, so they have the ability to swim a long distance.
All right. Stephen was curious, when are bears most active, the time of day and time of year?
Probably right now when they're going through this hyperphagia. They're trying to eat so many calories that they're, in some cases, eating 20 hours, 24 hours a day. And so they're active. And actually, bears are a lot like humans. In a normal circumstance, they're active during the day and they sleep at night. Now that they're trying to feed so much, you'll actually see bears feeding at night if they can find acorn trees that have a lot of mast. oak trees with a lot of mass.
Curious, you're talking about, you know, feeding and stuff, and hibernation. I know all of us think, oh, when it gets cold, they're going to hibernate. Is that the truth of black bears in Missouri? When do they usually hibernate, and do they usually fall asleep? Some unique facts about them, if you want to share on black bears.
Yeah, you know, bears, I consider hibernation to be a continuum where bears are on one end and groundhogs on the other. You could pick up a groundhog and shake it, and you couldn't wake that thing up. If you took a bear and you shook it, he's going to wake up. But his metabolism or her metabolism drops to about 30% of normal. They don't eat, they don't sleep, and they don't defecate for that 5-month period. So I consider them to be in a state of hibernation.
And you say that during that 5-month period. Anything else unique about facts about bears? You know, that's just crazy to think if they don't eat for 5 months and they don't use the restroom for 5 months. But what else that are interesting facts about black bears people should know that you think that are just kind of unbelievable?
The medical community is investigating the hibernation of black bears, and what's really interesting is how do they get rid of these poisons that your body produces? You have to get rid of these wastes. How does a bear's kidney take care of all these poisons that we produce? And it has some ramifications for people with kidney disease, for space travel. Bears have some tremendous ability to regenerate tissue while they're sleeping, and a lot of medical communities are studying that right now.
Should bear sightings be reported, and to whom, and how do they do that? Gary was asking that question.
Yeah, Gary. So we love to get reports from the public about our black bears. We love to know where they are, what they're doing. So if you happen to see one, first of all, be excited. That's awesome. That's a really incredible experience. Like I said, we don't have very many bears in the state, so if you get to see one, you should really enjoy it. And then give your county conservation agent a call, or you can call one of your regional offices. We also have on our website, you can report black bear sightings, and you can also send an email.
Awesome. Thanks again for all your questions, folks. We only have a few more minutes. We're going to take some more questions, keep them coming in, but we're going to keep on moving. Susan has a question. Do bears mate for life?
I doubt that bears mate for life. I think in some cases they use the same mates, but they also have something called multiple paternity. So a female could be bred by 2 or 3 different males, and each of her cubs could have a different parentage. And that's actually an advantage for her because those cubs are diverse enough that one of them could be sick for some reason, but the other 2 won't be.
That's interesting. I did not know that. I'm learning something as well right now. Teresa has a question. She's curious if, have there ever been problems at campgrounds with black bear here in Missouri? And if so, what should you do at a campground?
So we haven't really had any problems with campgrounds yet in Missouri, bears in campgrounds. But there's a lot of things that you can do to prevent that from happening in the first place. The biggest thing to do is make sure that you store all of your items that have any kind of scent appropriately. That includes all of your food, of course, any kind of food scraps, all of your garbage, and things like toiletries that also have a scent. Shampoo, sunscreen, lotion, toothpaste, things like that. And when I say store appropriately, I mean keep that in a locked car, in your trunk. You could keep it in your trailer. If you're out tent camping, you could hang it up between 2 trees, about 10 to 12 feet in the air and 4 feet away from any of the trees on the side. You definitely don't want to keep those items in your tent. That's the worst place. You don't want a bear investigating something smelly right where you're sleeping. The other thing you can do is keep your sleeping and cooking areas separate. That will help keep the cooking smells away from your tent.
Good information. That's really good information for all campers, especially down in southern Missouri right now.
Definitely.
Nancy's curious. She was wanting to know how long is the gestation period for a bear?
That's a little bit of a complicated question, but here's what happens. A bear breeds in June, and they have a fertilized egg floating around, but it doesn't actually attach to the uterus until sometime in late November and December. So the gestation period is really slow, or really short, rather. I mean, it may only be 30 or 40 days before that, from the time that implantation has occurred, and then she has the fetus. A female bear has a cub.
Steve's curious. He's wanting to know exactly, do male bears fight for females? Kind of like when you look at the rut for deer when two bucks are trying to fight for females. I mean, does that work with bear, or how's that work?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they do, and the reason I say that is we have caught male bears that on occasion were really beat up. And in order to beat up a 500-pound bear, it takes some pretty intense fighting. And so we do think that there's probably some dominance, and the larger adult male bears probably do more of the breeding.
All right. One more question here from Tony. He got on a little late, so he's curious, why is a fed bear a dead bear?
So a fed bear is a dead bear. That means that anytime that you provide food for a bear, you're basically signing a death sentence for that bear. Bears that learn to find food around homes or campsites, they return to those areas and continue to look for food. And a bear that has become a problem like that will eventually have to be put down. We can't have bears that are comfortable around humans. They can get aggressive and cause a safety issue. And so our only choice at that point is to destroy that bear. So the best thing that you can do in Missouri to help our bears out is to never, ever provide food for bears. Never let them learn that they can find food around human places. So keep all of your garbage stored securely, keep your pet food locked up, your bird feeders put away during the summer, and put up electric fencing if you need to around beehives, orchards, places like that.
You can't rehabilitate them.
You can't. Nope, they don't take well to being relocated. They can travel a long ways. They usually just come right back to where they were causing a problem in the first place. Or if not, they'll just create problems in the new place they get relocated to.
Al has a question here. He's curious, are people allowed to have bears as pets in Missouri?
Yeah, we do have a contingency where if you have a wildlife breeder permit, you can own a bear as a pet, but it can't be a wild bear. In this case, this person would have to buy that bear from a person that has a captive population. And then there are certain facilities that they would have to build in order to have that bear as a captive animal.
We've said this numerous times throughout this webcast, there are 350 estimated black bears in Missouri. What are the chances of actually getting to see a black bear in the wild or having an encounter with a black bear?
I don't think I have ever seen a bear in the wild in Missouri that I hadn't had caught or radio collared. So I've spent a great deal of time driving and walking in the woods, and I've never seen a wild bear. So it's a rare event. I'd certainly consider yourself lucky if you do see one.
All right. Orville he was wanting to know, is NBC working with campgrounds on bear information about posting up bear signs or letting people know to be bear aware?
Yeah, we have. We actually just sent out this spring a bunch of signs to our conservation areas, letting people know how to be bear aware. We also sent signs to private campgrounds all across southern Missouri to let campers know how they can be bear safe when they're in an area that might have a bear.
Anything else in community-wise? Are you sending out messages to communities about being bear aware, or what they should do if they have an encounter with a bear, if there's one in the city, or et cetera?
Yeah, we are. A lot of times people call police for the first response if they see a bear in their neighborhood. So we've been working with local police departments to help them learn how to interact with bears, how to handle a bear in a developed area. So we have developed some helpful guidelines for police to know what to do if they encounter a bear in a neighborhood.
All right. Quick. We're getting near the hour, and we're going to have some quick closing comments from both of you. What would you like people to know about bears in Missouri? If you could just tell them one important thing, idea, what you want to get across, what would you like to tell those that are listening?
I would just say that we are so excited that bears are coming back in Missouri. They're making a comeback, and that is awesome. They're an incredible animal, and we are really lucky to have them coming back in our state.
And I would echo those same thoughts. I don't think a lot of folks know that black bears are probably the second most intelligent mammal in Missouri besides humans. So, we're kind of gifted with these bears making a comeback into a Midwestern state, and all you ever hear about is bad things. People or animals going away, going extinct. Now we have this large animal that's making a comeback.
Well, thank you both for joining us. We really appreciate it, and We thank you as well, NBC Wild webcast participants. We appreciate your time and interest in this important topic. We ask you to join us on Thursday, October 13th from 6 to 7 p.m. to learn about the deadly deer disease called chronic wasting disease. We will talk about what it is, what we are doing to help limit its spread in Missouri deer, and what hunters and landowners and others can do to help protect our white-tailed deer from chronic wasting disease. Again, thank you very much for Jeff and Mary, and we hope everyone has found this NBC Wild webcast helpful and inspiring, and we learn more through our website about how to be bear aware at nbc.mo.gov. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. See you later.